Good day. My name is Kevin White, and I'm professor and chair of the Department of Civil, Coastal, and Environmental Engineering at the University of South Alabama. And today I'd like to talk to you a little about some wastewater challenges in the rural Alabama Black Belt and how technology and management solutions for these underserved rural communities are needed. My co-authors are Dr. Mark Elliott at the University of Alabama and Brandon Malanimi, master's student at the University of South Alabama. So what is the Black Belt? It's a region of the southeastern United States that was originally used to describe the prairies and black fertile soils in central Alabama and northeast Mississippi, but are also found throughout the southeastern United States, as you can see in this slide. This Black Belt region is characterized by vertisol soils and is termed in Alabama and Mississippi blackland prairie soil. These vertisols are shrink swell, and so they crack when they're dry and they swell up when they're wet, but they exhibit very low permeability to water. These are maps of both Mississippi and Alabama, and you can see the locations of these blackland prairie soils through central Alabama in the purple color, and in northeast Mississippi primarily in the dark green color. The Black Belt region has an interesting history. These soils were very good for cotton and rice farming, and back in the 1800s were home to large plantations worked by slave labor. After emancipation, many of these African Americans remained as sharecroppers. Some bought property, and many of the current residents live on heir property. The rural Black Belt counties are characterized by high minority populations, poverty, low educational attainment, and substandard health care. This is evident in some of the demographics from the U.S. Census Bureau. You can see that population density in the Black Belt region, 26.4 persons per square mile compared to the Alabama and U.S. averages. And the median household income in these rural counties, $28,800 per year per household, compared to the U.S. and Alabama averages, which are substantially greater. Wastewater management and sanitation is a key issue everywhere, but in these low population density areas, these rural areas, with soils that have perk rates of greater than 240 minutes per inch, the typical on-site wastewater system, consisting of a septic tank and a drain field, does not work. The water will not percolate down through the soil and be purified. The first option for most in these regions is a drain field mound system, but because of the soil conditions, these are very large and costly, $5,000 and up for a mound system depending on the size of the home. And while land is available in these rural regions, typically this option is cost prohibitive to most people that live here. Remember, the median household income is about $28,000 per year. So with soils that do not percolate and solutions that are very costly, what we end up seeing in this area is a lot of what we call straight pipes, direct discharge of raw wastewater out onto the ground near the home. Now, these straight pipes, direct discharge, if you will, have been documented in at least 13 U.S. states. But we're going to focus on what we've seen in Alabama as we have more information locally on these. In 2006, I was involved in a survey, a field survey of about 2,000 rural homes that were not on sewer in Bibb County, Alabama, which is southwest of Jefferson County or Birmingham, Alabama. This is not a true Black Belt county with vertisol soils. And we found that 13% of these rural residents had no septic tank, 15% had no drain field, and 50% showed evidence of raw sewage on the ground surface. And this was a non-Black Belt county. There are many obstacles to solving this problem. Obviously, the soils, the population density, there's not many people that would support a management district, economics, the cost of solutions, what technologies are most appropriate and cost effective, what type of management models will work in these rural, low population density environments, how can we develop financial models to provide not only capital costs but operation and maintenance of systems. And then there's generally a lack of community guidance in some of these small rural counties. What we don't know is the public health impacts of this raw sewage being directly discharged to the surface. Is it impacting health of the population in some way? Are children or pets outside interacting with this raw sewage and getting some kind of disease? There's also the environmental health impacts. These direct discharges are running directly into creeks and streams when it rains particularly. And we don't even know the condition of rural drinking water. And even some rural residents do not have access to potable drinking water in these rural regions. So what actions are needed? What is our path forward in these rural areas with populations that have not much financial means and yet live in an area where traditional cost-effective on-site wastewater systems do not work? So we divided it up into several areas. The communities and residents need some type of collection system. They can expand or upgrade the one or two municipal systems in each county. What kind of wastewater needs are out there that may be funded through various mechanisms? We also need to identify the best and cost-effective decentralized collection options. We need to identify rural clusters of homes that may be able to be clustered together and treated with one decentralized treatment system. And what are those systems? What are the most cost-effective treatment technologies that we can use? We also have to identify cost-effective management models for these low population density areas. We have to explore alternative, viable financial models to enable us to provide the capital for putting in wastewater systems of some type and maintaining these systems with operation and maintenance long term. We may need to develop alternative regulatory strategies. And I think there's a need to develop a how-to guide for rural communities so that they know where to go for funding, where to go for expertise, what types of technology should they be using, etc. An example of decentralized cluster systems where we would have collection and treatment for some cluster of homes is in Wilcox County, Alabama, in the Black Belt. The county border is outlined in red here, and the yellow circles indicate that there are at least 15 possible clusters of 30 or more homes that may be tied together with one decentralized treatment system. Camden, in the center of the county there, indicated by the arrow, is one of two small towns in the county that has a municipal wastewater system. We've identified the Furman Snow Hill cluster in the red box there that we'll expand upon next. This Furman Snow Hill community, or communities, are somewhat adjacent to one another in the eastern part of the county. And we've looked at connecting about 75 homes in these small communities to one decentralized cluster treatment system in the center of these two communities. In the Furman community only, we can connect 59 homes with 4.5 miles of 2-inch pipe with a step collection system, a septic tank effluent pump collection system that gets primary treatment at the source. And this would result in a design flow of about 12,000 gallons per day. The decentralized treatment technologies need to be cost efficient. They need to be modular. We would hope that we can remotely monitor the systems and remotely control the systems to minimize operation and maintenance cost, and be characterized by low upfront and O&M cost overall. This may include modular small membrane technology systems, packed bed systems, or even wetland type systems. We still have to deal with on-site wastewater because not everyone can be connected to a cluster system. If we look at whole house wastewater generation versus black water only wastewater generation, we see that there's a significant difference. Whole house is about 833 liters per day versus about 151 liters per day for black water only. Black water meaning toilet waste only. So if we take the black water the black water generation, which is much smaller in volume, our mound system option or our treatment system options like wetlands can be designed to be much smaller because of the lower volume being generated. This black water is the component of the overall household wastewater that is most problematic from a public health point of view. We may also consider holding tanks and pumping on some frequency every 2 to 3 months. Management models may be one of the most problematic of all of the obstacles. Not much population density to support rate fees for maintaining systems or even building systems. And so we need to look at other alternatives. Can large existing utilities manage small, rural, decentralized wastewater systems? Public entities versus private entities? Do we want to look at community level management, county level management, or even regional level management? Would a large existing municipal wastewater utility be willing to take on the management of some number of these smaller rural decentralized systems? What about the rural water providers, the management entities that provide rural water? What about the electric co-ops that are in the region? And what about solid waste managing entities that are always present in counties? All of these need to be looked at in terms of managing rural wastewater in low population density areas. Regulation and permitting is another issue that should be addressed. On-site systems discharging to the ground are typically permitted by the health department in almost all states. And then the state EPA office typically permits all surface discharges or large volume in-ground discharges. How would we go about permitting black water and gray water as opposed to the entire household wastewater being generated? Many of the codes do not account for black water only. Can we reuse treated wastewater? In silviculture, a lot of pine trees in central Alabama, in some type of agricultural activity that may be ongoing nearby. And in many of these rural counties, there are not ordinances in place to require sewer hookup, even if sewer is available. So those kind of things would also need to be addressed. And maybe there needs to be a special permit district, soils related, some type of general permit. So the creation of a how-to document for rural communities and utilities is needed to ID funding sources, to ID sources of expertise, what are the best technology options, appropriate management models, and permitting for discharge and or reuse. We're working on all of these as part of our efforts through a current EPA Gulf of Mexico cooperative agreement. The University of South Alabama and the University of Alabama have teamed up to work on this issue in Alabama. We have formed an Alabama Rural Water Wastewater Consortium with universities, departments of public health, US EPA, the state EPA, USDA, the governor's office, and several congressional offices. The Alabama Department of Public Health and USDA are just now kicking off an on-site wastewater pilot project in Lowndes County, Alabama, one of the Black Belt counties, to repair and install 100 plus failing or non-existent on-site systems. So there is money available through USDA for some of these types of systems. The CDC is funding UAB and Georgia Tech to do a health study in the Black Belt region of Alabama. Are there ties to rural wastewater issues and public health? And then we've also got a project that's not quite begun through the Columbia World Projects initiative in Columbia University. This will involve decentralized demonstrations. I'd be happy to entertain questions at my email address listed there on the screen. Thank you for your attention.